welcome to this workshop and lecture. Today you're going to be looking at how we plan units of inquiry into design. My name is Aidan Hammond and I'm head of the design program at Branksome Hall Asia. This lecture is going to look at how we use command terms in the GRASP model to structure authentic and engaging units of inquiry. So let's get started. Connection between command terms and the rubric for assessment. And the second thing is using this understanding then to develop a model to build a context. So let's look at how these are related first. Our goal as teachers is to try and achieve a context for the inquiry. In the subject of design, we really need to understand and create for our students a reason why we're doing what it is we're doing. And that reason needs to be authentic. So it takes a little bit of work to get there. In order to create that authentic context, we need to have a structure in place that we can organize our teaching and learning around. And finally, in order to have a good structure, we need to actually be very clear about what it is that we're trying to do. So today we're going to start with the small circle there, developing a rubric in command terms, and see how that is connected then to using a GRASP model to organize our inquiry. And finally, you should see how those two things connect to each other to create an engaging and authentic unit. So when we do these large projects in design, we have quite a lot of challenges. Our projects tend to run between 8 to 12 weeks long, and we meet about 3 times a week. So the students spend a lot of time in this inquiry. They're doing a lot of different types of learning experiences. So it's really, really important for the teacher to have clear expectations about what it is that the students need to do, and also that those expectations are authentic to the learning experience. So these two ideas here, the command terms and the GRASPs, they are related to designing that authentic, real learning experience. Okay? So one of the things that we're going to start to look at first are the verbs. As teachers, when we are describing what it is that we want to do, we need to be very, very specific about that. If we look at Bloom's taxonomy, where knowledge and thinking is organized in a hierarchy with lower order thinking down at the bottom and higher order thinking down at the top, we need to, as teachers, decide what are we asking our students to do and what level of thinking are we asking them. Ideally, we want our students to gather the higher order thinking. That's not always necessary for every single task, but overall, our goal really as teachers is to move our students up that hierarchy where they do have chances to do that higher level thinking. So if we look at what some of those verbs are, they're ones that we're familiar with, like classify or apply or arrange, and we're choosing those verbs very, very carefully. Okay? The important thing for us to understand is that the words that we choose, if we choose the word classify, it needs to be understood across the curriculum, not just in the design class, but also in math, in science, in English. We want our students to understand that when they're performing this task in one class, they can transfer that knowledge to another or new situation, and that's really, really important. Okay? So in our design curriculum, what we have done is we've organized our thinking and organized our ideas along this idea of low order thinking over here and higher order thinking over here. So something that is quite low order would be asking students to identify or list something, and something that is a higher order would be designing or creating a product or a solution. When we organize our rubric, there's a sequence there to that thinking that the lower levels of the rubric are generally referring to lower order thinking. And as we move through that, we get up to the higher level thinking. Okay? So let's look at how we use these in the curriculum, and then we'll look at how we use the the command terms in a specific rubric strand. So if we think about them from our curriculum, the command terms really structure our planning, our teaching, and our learning into sort of three areas. One is the rubric, which is what we use to organize everything around. The second is the kinds of tasks that we ask the students to perform to show their knowledge and understanding and skills. And the third is the assessment, whether it's formative or summative assessment, and the feedback that we give to the students about that. Okay, so let's look at it a bit in detail. As you know, the rubric is the structure of our program. It's how we measure our assessments. We organize our rubric so that it's a progression of thinking skills from low to high, and also that a well-designed rubric doesn't change from unit to unit, that it's something that's specific to the discipline, and when the unit changes, the rubric still more or less kind of stays the same. We also structure the tasks. We use the rubric to structure the tasks in order to meet our expectations. It can be a very easy mistake for a teacher to make, where they have tasks that maybe are fun or interesting or they think are important, but they really maybe have no connection to what's being measured or assessed in the rubric. Okay? So as a teacher, we need to consider the difference between how we organize our command terms and also the task-specific clarifications that we give to the students about what it is that we're expecting them to do. Okay? When we look at our tasks, we want to make sure that we're defining the tasks with the command term so that it's clear what it is that we're expecting students to do. When we give instructions for the tasks, again, we want to really be clear with the students and make sure that we're saying that we're asking you to describe or explain or justify. Each of those three words is a command term, and we're asking students to do one of those things, and we as teachers need to be very specific about that. Okay? So let's look at an example of what that might be. Here you have a very typical kind of design task where it might be that the students have to look at a product and do some kind of analysis with that product. If they're looking at if we're just asking them to list, then really we're saying, I want you just to give me short phrases, less than 10 words each, and just list the features of the design. If I'm asking students to describe, well, that's actually a higher order thinking, and so the expectation of what they produce in that should be different. So in this case, we might direct them to create a short paragraph. We might structure the teaching and learning to support them to make that paragraph. And finally, if we're asking students to analyze, well, that's right at the top of the taxonomy of thinking skills, and that's more work, and that's deeper thinking. And so again, we need to be very specific and very clear with the students what it is that we're asking them to do. And the third section that we use command terms in is with the assessment. And this is really important because we should be using command terms when we structure assessment, not only for formative feedback and formative assessment, but also summative assessment as well. So we want to be looking and making sure that our tasks are structured so that they can be assessed later. A common mistake that teachers make is they make a task and they have a rubric, but when it comes time to actually assess the task, the two things, the task and the rubric, they don't match up. Okay. Another important value with the command terms is that they are task-specific, and we have to explicitly teach them to the students. If we teach them directly to the students, if they're visible in the classroom, if it's part of the teaching and learning, then students begin to understand what the expectations are, and students then can actually achieve higher because they know better what it is that they're trying to achieve. Okay? So I think for me personally as a teacher, this is probably the key thing here, is that our teaching and learning of the command terms for the students needs to be explicit, and it needs to be visible because it has this huge impact on their fluency, on their literacy, and also on their subject knowledge as well. Also, when we use command terms, if a student has been asked or is expected to explain and justify something, and you're giving formative feedback, and you can say to the student, you know what, you haven't explained and really justified here. All you've really done is just outlined or list. And if the students understand the progression between outlining, describing, explaining, and justifying, if they understand that there's a progression there, then they know what they need to do in order to improve their performance on the task. It's very, very clear to them.